So, the preparation is important. You need to have a number of strips of various thicknesses that will easily go in between the strings, but really hold tight too. You don't want it too thin that they won't mute the strings well. Then you've got to make sure the alignment of the strings is correct. Alignment to the hammers. If you need to adjust the hammer to the strings, and the strings, you can see you need them nicely straight from the pin straight on through. And if you see little differences that you can change, all the better. Changing with a little screwdriver, that you can move the strings side to side and get them nicely aligned, nicely spaced between the three strings. And you can use the original damper alignment as a guide, but even that's not sure in pianos that aren't really high quality. So before you start tuning, you want to make sure your spacing between the strings is correct and the alignment to the hammer is correct, that the hammer travel hits, in the ideal situation, hits directly in the center, or the strings are in the center of the hammer. So, and then you can put your mute strip in, depending on what you have. If you've got a nice thick mute strip, that's good. And put it as far as you can up to the treble, and still leaving space for your hammer to strike. So you put that mute strip in with the little screwdriver, and you want that to correctly mute out the sound of the outer strings, so you just listen to the inner string. The rest is muted out. You can head on down into the bass with the same technique. Another mute strip, and you can see now your hammers. I have two because I've got one with a short number 3 head, and I've got a longer one, and I've even reduced the diameter of the tuning tip, because there are a lot of really old pianos where the pins are really so close together you can't get the standard diameter in between the tuning pins. So this is with a number 2 or number 1 tuning tip, a smaller diameter than this one. So this comes in really handy for older pianos, and then also in grand pianos too. And then you want to adjust your length here. Want a fairly good, comfortable length to get used to. And it's okay if you have a little bit of looseness to it, because you're going to use that looseness as a kind of impact wrench as you throw that hammer. And you see the position of my thumb on a lot of times. Now up here, yes, if I have to really turn the pin, then I'm going to put all my weight up at the top of the hammer, and with the weight of my whole shoulder and arm, first of all, that's torquing the pin, and then I give little jumps like that to move that pin. But then I also give little bumps to the tuning hammer. Likewise, I can bump the tuning hammer like this, because you have to remember that it's not always turning the pin in the wood. What you're thinking about is the tuning pin is a tool to use in varying the tension of the various lengths of the strings. So it might just need a very simple bump to get the tension up a little bit on this, bringing it up, bringing it back down. So, for example, just a slight touch like that is going to change. Just a slight bit of pulling on the and bending that tuning pin. While bending it, you're just kind of, it's quite flexible, so you can actually kind of bend it and then bend it back, and then you make sure that when you finish tuning that particular note, kind of knock that pin around, make sure the note stays stable. You don't have to do a lot of way up, then way down, then way back up, and turning the pin each time in the pin block. Sometimes all it requires is just simply changing the tension on that length of the string, and then that length of the string, and then the speaking length of the string. And once you bring up this tension, that brings up this tension, then that brings up that tension, then you have down at the bottom of the string also, you got those other lengths to take care of as it goes through the bridge, it goes to the hitch pin. So all of those have to be pulled up and then released back down so that that speaking length stays stable. And it, now for example, if you can hear that, just a very slight boom, boom touch of it, it's already a faster beat rate. I just give it a little bit of a touch and it comes back down into the beat rate. See, I haven't even moved the pin in the pin block. It hasn't been actually changed position. It's just changed the tension of the strings. But once you, for example, take off the tension, then you want to bring it back up, and then you want to wiggle it around to make sure that as you're playing it, it's not going to go out of tune again. It's going to stay in tune once you wiggle it. That's why you don't really need a special expensive impact wrench that has the little mechanism in there. You just need a head that has a little bit of looseness to it, and you can do your impact, because all it takes is a very small amount of impact. You can hear that beat rate. Yeah, already just by simply doing a little bit of a boom like that. I've got my thumb here. I give a little bit of an impact. It's already faster beat rate. And then I would come back to the proper beat rate. And if I jiggle it around to kind of relieve any extra tension or bending of that tuning pin, I release that tension, and if the beat rate stays the same, then I know it's going to hold the tune. So that's important in the manipulation of the tuning hammer. Now let's say I really need to make a big change. Well, of course I'm going to put it on to the maximum so it's nice enough, and then I'm going to pull up the tension. Now that pulling up the tension, first of all, is kind of torquing the pin before the pin jumps. So that torquing of the pin, and then by giving very slight, and there I feel it in my hand. I feel that little click, and you can feel that as the pin jumps in the pin block. So it's very, now when I release it, already that tuning pin comes back a little bit, and the beat rate goes down a little bit. Then I want to make sure that it's not going to change anymore by jiggling that pin around. I don't have to slam on the, like some people do, they pound, they say, well, I've got to pound it harder than the pianist will ever play it. Well, all you're going to do is damage the hammer. You get the same effect by simply wiggling the... And then you're sure that everything is balanced, the tensions on the various lengths of the strings are balanced, and it's going to stay in tune. So you see how it's jumping up? Now these tuning hammers have a big ball on the end of them. I can't see putting my hand clear around a ball. I suppose they work if you use them as a weight to turn that tuning hammer. Well, I find my good old Hale, ancient Hale adjustable is a perfect ideal tuning hammer for me. Had it for 48 years. It's nice and heavy. You don't want with these wood-handled, lightweight tuning hammers. You can't get that type of impact wrench action that you get with a nice heavy hammer. So that's what I want to say about handling the tuning hammers. Now, if you want to put it to the shortest, you're going to get a bit less of that impact wrench effect. The longer you put it, don't want to get it too long either, then you get more inertia from this part of the hammer that's going to help throw that tuning pin and change the tension of the strings. So, now another thing about when you play a note, on that string, that one string you're listening to, is going to, first of all, on the impact, it may go to, let's say, A. You want A440. Well, the initial impact is going to go a little high, and then it'll settle back down again. If you've got a electronic tuning device, you can actually see it go up 442, then it comes back down to 440 or near 440, like that. Good quality pianos, the higher the quality of the piano, the more rapidly it goes directly to, and it stays stable, that particular pitch. On cheaper pianos, it will vary. It'll go 440, 439, it'll kind of vary. And then that explains why on cheap pianos, you can't get the three strings exactly perfect, because one of them is varying in its pitch. It's unstable, even when it's tuned. Even when it's stable, on the striking of the key, it's going to have a different rate of stabilization. And so you get this wobbling sound. And in higher quality pianos, once you tune all those three strings to the right pitch, they all come on and they all vibrate harmoniously together, and that amplifies the sound and extends the length of the sound and gives a purer sound. And that's the difference between a cheap piano and an expensive high quality piano, is the quality of the stability of arriving at the final vibration, cycles per second, and along with the other two strings, that they all vibrate together, the same thing. Now, you do have, in all pianos, false beats coming out of the strings. Even in cheaper pianos, you get a lot more false beats. That's fairly steady. The false beats come in to play much more up in the high treble, in the treble end, where you're going to get strings that you just, let's say I'm mute out, I'm listening to one string. That's fairly good. See, it's a kind of a... Well, sometimes all it takes is simply with this small screwdriver, move the string just microscopically left and right, and that evens it out. If you get a really flagrant type of Like, you can hear that it's, well, move it a little bit. It smooths it out and helps you tune. Because if you have to tune one string that has false beats against the second string that also has false beats, then you're going to be trying to listen for the best compromise between one false beat and another false beat. Sometimes you have to try to make the wave of one false beat go against the opposite wave of the other string's false beat to cancel out the false beats. If that's the best you can do, well, you have to live with it. But when you're tuning up in the treble area, you're going to get into the situation where you're going to be listening to, let's say, the double octave, and you're going to want to hear a nice pure sound. When it's nice and pure, then they're tuned. Whereas if you have a false beat and it's going wow, 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 well, then you're going to think, well, I'm too high or I'm too low. And then you'll change the tension, and that won't help because what you're actually listening to is the false beat. So the better you can get rid of the false beats, the better you're going to be for tuning it. Like that. There's a wow, wow, wow. So if I just simply move the string back and forth, I can get it to smooth out. Now you can also, in grand pianos it's a lot simpler, but in an upright piano you have to take the action out, and you take you can actually tap the string and seat it firmly onto the bridge. And in doing that you want to use a brass rod, so you don't want to hit steel against steel and nick the string. With the brass, if you can just make yourself a little brass thing and put it on the string at the bridge and give it a tap, you can seat those strings onto the bridge pin. So that string sits down onto the bridge. Because whenever a string creeps up on the bridge pin, it's going to create a false beat. So that string has to be nice and tight against the bridge. And to do that, you can do that by tapping the string down. Well, a lot of times you'll find that just simply this technique of moving the string side to side clears it up, because the string kind of digs into that metal, and so it creates a kind of a false beat there. Whereas if you move it back and forth, you can kind of smooth out that metal and bring back the purity of the sound of the string. So those are some tricks, and in another video we'll get into tuning up in the treble.